Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Of course, I am your host, as always, Charles Hamaker, here with you on June 19th of 2023. Here, observing Juneteenth, of course, a significant day in American history, obviously commemorating the emancipation of enslaved Black African Americans. This day obviously symbolizes freedom, liberation, the ongoing pursuit of equality and justice for all. So I wanted to acknowledge that, obviously, as we begin the show here. Nice to be in studio. I know the glare is kind of reflecting off my head. It's just part of being me in my head. So we'll get straight to it. You know, obviously with the Seahawks being in their offseason, going through mini camp and OTAs, things are a little slow in that department, and I really don't anticipate that picking up much unless we get sort of injury-related news or anything along that sort of perspective. But outside of that, there's a ton of stuff going on in terms of our other teams, of course. So we'll start with our Mariners, as we always do when the Seahawks aren't doing much. Starting on June 12th versus the Marlins, an 8-1 win to begin a 6-game homestand. Two players of the game to start that series against Miami. Player of the game, number 1, right-handed pitcher Bryce Miller, 6 innings pitched, 1 hit given up, 1 run allowed, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts. So a nice outing for Miller after 2 struggling starts against the Yankees and the Rangers, which, you know, I've said it in our recaps of those games. Those are tough starts, you know, especially against those teams, some of the best offenses in all of baseball. So to have those struggles really, you know, isn't that big of a slight on Miller, who, again, has not pitched against AAA hitting and is coming up straight from AA and is essentially learning how to pitch at the major league level on the fly. Our second player of the game, who is not on our photo of the game here, it is J.P. Crawford with this photo by Matthew Bermudez. First baseman Ty France, 1 hit, 1 run, and 3 RBIs, a 3-run homer to really help put the exclamation point on this game as the Mariners would be able to take game 1 from the Marlins. The Marlins, a team that's started the season off pretty well and could challenge for their division. There's a lot of good talent all up and down that lineup. So to hold them to 1 run in that win was great. Let alone scoring 8 runs of your own. In game 2 on June 13th versus the Marlins, a 9-3 win. Our player of the game, designated hitter Mike Ford, 3 hits, 3 runs, 3 RBIs as the Mariners again jump all over the Marlins, get out to a big lead. They do give up 3 that day, but that's, you know, compared to 9, not that big of a slight. Our photo of the game, despite having some good ones of Mike Ford, as he hit 2 homers in that game. It was only his second multi-homer game of his career. The other one also coming at T-Mobile Park in 2019, but he was a member of the Yankees at the time. So nice to see, you know, Mike Ford get that. Cal Raleigh in this photo of the game by Brian Saldana, looking pretty lovingly at the home run trident, which is fun to see, you know, as Cal homered in that game as well. So, you know, nice first 2 games to start the series, big offensive games, something you've needed. We've talked about the offensive consistency for years now. I wouldn't say weeks because that would be a lie. And in game 3, not so much of that, though. You know, the first 2 games, just big offense. The pitching's able to get stuff done as we've expected, as we've seen throughout the course of the year. Game 3, not so much. June 14th versus the Marlins, a 1-4 loss. This one was tough. This one was very tough. The starting pitching did its job. The relief, I mean, 2 runs against is not bad. So 2 runs to start it against the starter, not bad. That's manageable. That should be manageable. Justin Topa ended up giving up 2 runs later in this game. The end of the day doesn't really matter. 2 and 4 is pretty reasonable. When your offense only gets 1, though, that's not as much. This was a tough break because Eugenio Suarez had 3 balls die on the morning track that otherwise probably should have been homers if the weather had been a little bit better. It was a little bit chilly that night. So that was pretty brutal, and including which was featured in our photo of the game by Chris Liu. Chris is making his debut here. a home run robbery by Marlins outfielder Jesus Sanchez. Sanchez robbing this one on the warning track. It would have been a game-tying grand slam. Instead, excuse me, it turns into a sac fly. Ty France scores, and the Mariners only get one run. So that was tough. That was tough to lose that one. You arguably should have at least gone to extras. You arguably would not have been in that position had you been able to score more runs earlier throughout the course of the game. That's a different issue. But it's a series win. It's a series win against a good Marlins team. Series wins are what playoff teams do, right? So we go over to this White Sox series where the White Sox, coming into the series, they were under five. They were 10 games under 500. They haven't looked at all like the team they were last year, and they're just relatively struggling. So the Mariners are able to pull one out, a tight one, on June 16th on Friday, the third time that the Mariners have worn their City Connect jerseys. They get their first win in those City Connect jerseys, a 3-2 win, a nice and tight one there. I played the game right fielder Teoscar Hernandez, 2 hits, 1 run, and 2 RBIs, a go-ahead solo homer in the 7th. June 17th versus the White Sox, I almost skipped there. Our photo of the game here in this nice and tight win. This game, the Mariners had a 2-run lead early. They gave up the 2 runs to tie this thing up. And then late, Teoscar Hernandez hits the game go-ahead home run late in the 7th inning, celebrates with the trident there. And the Mariners would be able to get a win in that one to begin that series. Game 2, June 17th, this was the day that the Mariners wore their Steelheads jerseys. So they're the Steelheads this day. The Steelheads would lose to the White Sox in tight fashion. Unfortunately, this one was one of the more frustrating losses over the course of the entire season. Played the game shortstop JP Crawford. JP 1 hit, 1 run, 1 RBI, and 2 walks on the day. So JP able to reach base 3 times in the Steelheads uniforms there, as you can see in the photo of the game by Live Lions. This was a tough one. This was a very frustrating contest to see. Just, again, the offensive inconsistency here. This game went into extra innings. The Mariners had a lead going into the 9th, too. They would give that up. They would go 3-2. They had a lead, 3-2. They pitched Paul Seawolves back-to-back days. And the Yankees, oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. The White Sox are able to push a run across to tie this thing up to send us to extra innings. In extras, it would take 11 innings, but Chicago would get that 4th run, and the Mariners were unable to respond, and just frustrating. It was another sort of exclamation point about the offense's inconsistency, the offense's inability to score runners in scoring position. Just frustrating all around. And the Mariners did have a few chances with the bases loaded, I do believe. So that was tough. Excuse me, especially when it started off pretty well. JP hit a leadoff homer. Continues to have great games when he's played in the Steelhead jersey. Had the grand slam in his first game in it. I believe it was 1 for 3 with an RBI in his second game last year, and then the leadoff homer in this one as well. So just tough to lose that one. But again, series wins are what important. So it's important for you to bounce back and get the rubber match. And the Mariners were able to do so on June 18th versus the White Sox. A 5-1 winner. Player of the game, left fielder Jared Kelenic. Kelenic 1 hit and 3 RBIs. A bases loaded clearing triple late into this one to an 8th inning, matter of fact, to give the Mariners much, much needed insurance after we obviously know what I mentioned. Last game happened where they gave up the run in the 9th inning to tie things up. But Kelenic makes sure that doesn't happen, snaps the Mariners 0 for 6 streak with the bases loaded over the course of the homestand, and is able to clear that off, give the Mariners some good insurance runs after they had really been dominated by Chicago starter Lance Lynn. Lynn had 16 strikeouts on the day against the Mariners, which is a White Sox franchise record, tied for the franchise record. And the Mariners offense, they had gotten 2 runs across in the 3rd inning as Julio Rodriguez doubled to score Cal Raleigh and JP Crawford. But after that, they'd really gone stagnant and looked bad. So I'm talking heavily about the offense, and you'd think that, I'd go to a photo for our photo of the game here of an offensive player, but no, I rather went with this photo of Eugenio Suarez here by Liz Wolter, celebrating the first of the 3 outs in the 9th inning there. Really ecstatic play by Eugenio to get that out. And it was a tough one. I think it was especially after the way that excuse me, the game before had gone, just frustrated with that sort of loss and wanting to make sure that they get the series win. They end the homestand out on the right note, and they don't let this one get away. So that was important. We go over to our player of the week here. I went with Teoscar Hernandez. Over the past 7 days, that encapsulates the entire homestand because there was a day break in between the two series. Teo, 10 hits, 4 runs, 2 homers, 6 RBIs, 1 stolen base, a 385 batting average, a 4.48 on base percentage, and a 7.31 slugging percentage. So Teo really continuing to find his stride in the month of June, which is great to see from Teo, because I know the first few months for him were a little bit slow. People were wondering, what the whole deal was. It was stated at the beginning of the year that Teo starts the year off slow. That's always how it goes. But that's for the folks who always seem to over-exaggerate. Anyway, as you can see on the banner, 2 series win. Is this progress? I'd say there's progress, but again, you look at the Game 3 against the Marlins, you look at Game 2 against the White Sox, and even for the most part, Game 3 against the White Sox, that offensive consistency continues to show. In the White Sox, the 2 games to begin the series against the White Sox, manager Scott Service talked about focus. He talked about, better plate appearances, maybe watching for that extra ball to draw the starter out and knock the starter out early. They had knocked a bunch of the starters out they had played against early on to get into the bullpen. And that was important, especially with the White Sox coming into town, having the night before thrown 6 relievers out there against the Dodgers, and then coming into to Seattle. Seattle was able to jump on that, and set themselves up really. Miami, not Chicago. No, it was the Chicago series. Yes, that's right. Because the night before, yes, okay. The series opener against Chicago, not really able to do it, 3-2. Game 2, no. Game 3. So it didn't really work out in that series. The Miami series, it did. They were able to get the 2 starters out early, and it kind of worked in their favor. Obviously, they lose Game 3. Some frustration and some bad luck in there. Yes. Do I think it's progress? To answer the little question mark on the screen there, yes, I do think it's progress. After the really rough stretch against the Yankees and the Rangers, the starting pitching staff looks to kind of settle back in. Again, those are 2 really good offenses, and when your offense isn't supplying their own job and doing their own part, holding their end of the bargain up, it can be a lot. I'm sure it can be a lot, and it can be overwhelming. So you still need to see more consistency at the plate, and you're going to have a big, big test here on this upcoming road trip against 2 great teams, both of them in the AL East. But I do think there is some progress. I do think there is progress here. I think it's important to note that. And there are some guys that are getting hot and are finding their groove. There are also some guys who kind of struggled over the past homestand. JP Crawford, had that good game on the 17th, but his past 7 days weren't too great. 4 hits over 22 plate appearances for a 176 batting average. Had 3 extra base hits, but 6 walks to 6 strikeouts, not so great. So, and that's incredible to think about as well, because JP was actually one of the best hitters on this team for the large majority of the season. So if he can get out of this slump of sorts, you make the offense even more dangerous. So it really is just about taking better plate appearances, not chasing, taking more of that simple approach that we really saw in this last game, which I know I say taking a simple approach, and then you think about, they struck out against Lynn 16 times. Yes. So it really is about finding that consistency, and they haven't hit it yet. They really have not hit it all season. They're going to have a tough test to do so, though, when their next road trip rolls around. So we'll get to injury and roster-related news here. On the 12th of June, right-handed pitcher Penn Murphy was placed on the 15-day injured list with right elbow inflammation. As a corresponding roster move, the team selected right-handed pitcher Ty Adcock from AA Arkansas. And also to make room on the 40-man roster for Adcock, left-handed pitcher Robbie Ray was placed on the 60-day injured list with a left flexor strain. The move was made to make room for Adcock, as I mentioned, on that 40-man roster. Robbie has been around the team and the clubhouse as of recently. He's got this giant arm brace on as he continues to rehab and get back from Tommy John surgery. Obviously, very, very early in that rehab and recovery. But it's nice to see Robbie around, a veteran guy who can help out this young pitching staff. So that's it for team and roster related moves. The Mariners sit at 500. They're directly at 500 with a 35-35 record. Sits them as still at fourth in the AL West. It'll be a big and important test to see if they can really find some ground with the Astros kind of vulnerable right now, having been swept by the Reds. Yordan Alvarez just went on the injured list. So can they jump the Angels and the Astros and take advantage of this? It won't be easy, but there is an opportunity there. So it starts in the Bronx against the Yankees, June 20th through 22nd. All of those games are at 4:05 p.m. Pacific time. June 20th, 21st, and 22nd are all at 4:05 p.m. PST. Seattle looking to get some revenge back after really getting manhandled by the Yankees in the series here in Seattle, in the first two games at least, before having to walk off the Yankees in Game 3 to end that series and salvage a game. This next series against this other AL East opponent normally would have been sort of shrugged upon because the Orioles really have not been that good for years to come, and that has resulted in why, they have all this young talent right now. The Orioles are good. The Orioles have a really quality start to the 2023 season, and it won't be any sort of cakewalk when the Mariners start their 3-game series in Baltimore starting on June 23rd. June 23rd, a 4:05 p.m. Pacific time start. June 24th at the Orioles, a 1:05 p.m. start. And then June 25th at the Orioles, a 10:35 a.m. start to round out that 6-game road trip. Again, a tough road trip against the AL East. It will not be easy, but if Seattle really wants to keep some momentum up and really build on that, they're going to have to come out of this 6-game set with a positive record. So heading over, talking about positive records, at least in the course of the past 3 games, the Storm starting off the season horrible, which was somewhat to be expected. But again, outside of the Aces loss, and that rings true now with the 2 games that they've played against the Aces, and we'll get to that, Seattle has kept just about every game close that they've lost. They're finding some traction. They were finding that traction. They were settling in. I fully thought that they were going to figure things out. I know in the offseason I called it a crazy sleeper pick that they'll make the playoffs. I highly doubt that now, even with the progress, unless things get really crazy and they really start to find their groove. But it doesn't matter. They won 2 of the last 3. So June 13th at the Phoenix Mercury, an 83-69 win. Our player of the game guard, Sammy Whitcomb, the former UW Husky, 18 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals off the bench, with 3 starters in double figures in that win. That would be Seattle's 2nd win of the season. A big one to start their 3-game road trip. The next game on the road, June 15th at the Aces, a 63-96 loss. This one was tough. It was close until late in the first half when the Aces really went on a run to go into the halftime mark. And Las Vegas was really able to dominate throughout the course of the way to pick up that win and to deal Seattle their 2nd biggest loss of the season. The other one, obviously, being the other loss to Las Vegas, which was a 41-point differential. This one, a 33-point differential. So that one tough, but again, more positive generally to see that they kept up in the first half or most of the first half than to expect this Storm team at all to be able to beat the Aces. I know they are beatable. They have lost this season. I just don't think that Seattle would be the 2nd team to do it. Maybe if they play later on in the season and the Aces are resting players or they have folks out, but no. Then June 17th to close out their road trip at the Dallas Wings, a 109-103 victory. Another high-scoring and tight game against the Wings. It feels like every time that these 2 teams play over the course of the past 3 years, it's high-scoring and it's really tight. Our player of the game guard, Jewel Lloyd, the Gold Mamba goes off for 39 points, almost had 40, but missed a free throw late. 5 rebounds, 5 assists, going 7 for 12 from the 3. All starters were in double figures for this one. Jordan Horston and Sammy Whitcomb each poured in 8 points. So while Horston had started most of the games, since last week at the power forward spot. Mercedes Russell slots in, I believe, sort of as a sort of size matchup there. I know Horston had played well and doesn't necessarily lose you a ton of size, but Russell's a little bit bigger there. And so they opt for that. Horston's still able to be effective from the bench. So it's incredible to see it week by week, the progression that the Storm make, and I mentioned it. Outside of those two Aces losses, the Storm have had tight games. Obviously 33 and 41 point deficits against the Aces take that away. And I think that if you really took those two games out of the statistics, the Storm would be a lot better on all the statistics. They already look pretty solid in terms of sort of stuff like we've looked at points, blocks per game, steals per game, stuff like that. Net differential, not so great. But even if you take those two games out, net differential is already pretty good. My point to say is, in the stats posts that we do every game day, make sure you see that so you can see where to find those every game day. The Storm aren't last in the league in everything. It's a young team. Again, I've said that again in numerous ways, whether it be how often, how much these players know each other or their actual age themselves. Yes, it's a young team, and that's understandable. It's probably going to need to be a young team before they really challenge for a fifth title in this league. But seeing the growth, the continued growth from Ezi Magbagor, we know what Jewel Lloyd can do. Jewel Lloyd is a known commodity, an absolute bucket in every way, shape, or form. But it's more about the development of these younger players, whether it's Magbagor, obviously Horston, even Ivana Dojkic. It's just been incredible to see those players continue to make an impact and really show out, even with some of the veterans, seeing Sammy Whitcomb have a great game off the bench. You'd like to see that more out of Sammy because most of the games this year, Sammy struggled, and that's fine. It's going to happen. Kia Nurse, as well as someone I'd look forward to have more success as of late, has had two solid games, but otherwise has been relatively quiet in the games that she hasn't had those good games. So the point being, again, is the progression of the Storm throughout the course of the year. I know I talked about it earlier in the segment, and I mentioned it in the offseason. I thought that maybe the Storm team was scrappy enough, had enough sort of chip on their shoulder to really go out there and prove everybody wrong and fight for a playoff spot. Technically, that is still possible, but I think it's unlikely. And the other point with that we talked about throughout the course of the year was to watch the progression of some of these younger players. Excuse me. Ezi Magbagor had been having a great year as a starter at the 5 last year until Tina Charles came in, which, I can't blame the Storm for making that decision to add on another talented piece that's trying to get a ring when they're trying to get Sue Bird a final ring. It makes sense, but it definitely did have an impact on the way that Ezi had been trending up. So to see Horston continue to find confidence, to continue to find different pockets in the offense where she can score, to have Ivana Dojkic be the starter now at the point guard position after we had been talking about that, and it's crazy, even though I mentioned all this, the fact that there are players who I would want to get more minutes, like Arela Girantes, who aren't getting minutes and aren't necessarily getting that opportunity, which is tough considering that it's been talked about that Arela just needs an opportunity. But seeing that growth progression throughout the course of the year, because Coach Quinn has said as recently as last week, the last game that we talked to her, that her rotation is not completely set in stone yet. They're still playing with that. They're still looking at that. They're still evaluating, which is interesting. I won't lie to you. It is interesting. But it's just great to see the continued sort of progression from these young players. And that's what you have to look at. I know that it's like, oh, it's rough to see the losses and see the win-loss record, but you can't look at it that way this year. You're ideally getting a lottery pick this year to continue to add to your young players that will be the future of this franchise, will be the next era of Storm basketball. That's what happened with these other players. I know that Sue Bird in her ceremony at her jersey retirement said that by the time the Storm had gotten around to Brianna Stewart drafted and Jewel Lloyd being drafted, she was thinking about retiring at that point, or being done. And she said that those two really gave her life there. Sue Bird is a top overall pick, so it's like you're seeing the different eras here of Storm basketball with Sue Bird, Breanna Stewart, and then Jewel Lloyd. They're all top picks, so you've got to really imagine that you're going to have to make the future of this franchise through the draft. And that's more than likely what's going to happen. You just got to be a little bit patient with it. I know the losses are hard, but that's what I try to focus on, whether that's watching games at home, being there at the games, or when we're looking at something like this, where we are right now with me and you here, right, is the general progression of the Storm as they move throughout the course of the year, to see the growth of these young rookies and these younger players, not just the rookies themselves. So, excuse me, that was a mouthful. Looking ahead, they sit at a 3-7 record, which again is not great, but they're 10th in the league, so they're not the worst. There are two teams that are worse than the Storm right now. And 4th in the Western Conference. Again, two teams worse than the Storm right now. Interesting that they are both in the Western Conference. So that's, again, interesting. But looking ahead, this one, it's not going to be an easy way to start out the first of this homestand. They play Connecticut June 20th versus Connecticut, a 7 o'clock start, which is on NBA TV, Fox 13 Plus, or Amazon Prime Video, whichever the three of those that you have. June 22nd versus Indiana, 7 o'clock, and that one's on Amazon Prime Video. And then June 24th versus the Mercury. The Mercury are one of the two teams that are worse than Seattle and all the W. That's a 6 o'clock start. Yes, a little bit odd. We go from 2 7 o'clocks to a 6 o'clock start. But that one is a Commissioner's Cup game. It is on Twitter, interestingly enough, Fox 13 Plus, and Amazon Prime Video. So, yes, streaming on Twitter, interesting. But those are three pretty unique games, just because Connecticut is who dealt the Aces their first loss of the season. They are actually second in all of the league standings at a 9-3 record. We look at. I'm looking at here we go. So, yeah, you go from playing Connecticut, who's sitting at the second most wins in all the league. Then you look at Indiana, who's 4-7, so one win above you. And then Phoenix, who's 2-8, who's one win below you. So it's very much a mixed bag here. But, again, that general progression is what we're looking for. We go over to our Sounders here, who sort of had the week off, depending on which players you are, as there was a sort of international break here for the Sounders, which Brian Schmetzer said kind of came at a tough time. The Sounders had just gotten Christian Roldan back from injury, Raul Ruiz-Diaz back from injury, Jordan Morris should be back soon, and then they go on a week break, And normally you'd say, well, a break is normally a good thing. Yes, that is typically true, but with the way that the Sounders had been playing, although I talked about it last week, dropping points to Charlotte, wasting a 3-goal effort, you wanted to keep that moving momentum-wise, right? So that was tough in that instance, but I think in terms of getting guys even more healthy and maybe getting a little reset, maybe it's good there. We move over to team notes here, and there are 4 different players who went up to their respective national teams. On June 12th, Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan were both named to the U.S. men's national team roster for the CONNECTICUT Gold Cup, as the red, white, and blue aim to capture their 8th trophy in that respective tournament. Roldan and Morris are both part of the 23-man roster for the U.S. Morris, having made 52 appearances and 11 goals while representing his country, including 2 appearances during the previous Men's World Cup in Qatar against Wales and Netherlands. He's tied for 5th in MLS goals with 9, including a club record 4 goals against Sporting Kansas City on March 25th. Roldan has made 32 appearances for the U.S. and was part of the squad at the World Cup, but did not make any appearances. He has started in 8 of his 9 MLS regular season appearances in 2023. There we go. Most recently recording a goal and an assist in that game against Charlotte. So you see, again, with that performance by Roldan, you want to keep things rolling. But, I'm sure there are pros and cons on both ends. We look over here, June 16th. Defenders Javier Arriaga and Alex Roldan are representing Ecuador and El Salvador, respectively, this past weekend, in the international friendly action during the current FIFA window. Arriaga joins Ecuador for a pair of friendlies in the U.S., while Roldan has joined El Salvador for 2 Asia-based friendlies ahead of the summer's CONCACAF Gold Cup. Arriaga has 20 appearances for Ecuador dating back to 2018, most recently playing in a pair of friendlies against Australia on the 24th and 28th of March. He was also included in Ecuador's final roster for the World Cup, appearing on the bench for each of the 3 matches that the country played in. He also had 9 appearances during the squad's qualifying campaign, scoring his lone international goal in a 6-1 rout of Colombia on November 17th of 2020. Roldan, this is Alex, has 19 caps for El Salvador since making his international debut in a 2-0 win over Guatemala at the 2021 CONCACAF Gold Cup, a game in which he scored his lone international goal. He's appeared in 11 matches during El Salvador's 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign, captaining the squad on multiple occasions. So nice to see there sort of a mix of players getting into their respective national teams. Obviously, that's a big deal, a big honor to be able to represent your country on the biggest stage, especially with the World Cup. And appearances like this, whether it be, excuse me, the U.S. guys in the Gold Cup or Alex and Javier with the internationals, are chances to say, hey, when 2026 rolls around, who's going to be remembered? You know, are they going to remember having Arriaga and Roldan for those respective teams? Will recently announced rehired Greg Berhalter want to have Morris and Roldan around when 26 comes around? Instances like this are important for that reason. So the Sounders sit at an 8-win, 6-loss, 4-draw record. They are sitting at 28 points right now, which is good for third in the Western Conference. Now they've dropped to third after hanging around first and second for the longest time. Their next 2 matches, some tough ones. June 21st at LAFC, which is a 7:30 p.m. start. A rematch there of earlier in the season when the 2 teams fought to a pretty intense draw where statistically Seattle was the better club. And then June 24th versus Orlando City SC here at home at Lumen Field. A little bit of a late one here. I know people don't always like the 7:30 starts. I don't blame you. But that one here at Lumen Field against Orlando City, again, sort of similar to, I talked about the Storm and the way that those teams that they're playing against in the upcoming week stack up. LAFC sitting in Seattle's spot at second in the Western Conference. So, you know, not that. That's going to be a big battle. That's important. That's points. If you're able to get a win there, you know, that would put you atop the Western Conference, depending on what St. Louis does. And then Orlando City. Orlando is a playoff team in the East right now. And it's crazy because statistically, they're only 2 points off of Seattle's total. But in the Eastern Conference, they are 7th behind Atlanta, Columbus, Philadelphia, New England, Nashville, and Cincinnati. So, a little bit of a tough one to see that. You know, it'll be a big week for the Sounders, again, having wasted points in Charlotte, coming off of that draw against the Timbers in the doubleheader, and then going on this international break where you're kind of halting momentum. So, keeping with the soccer theme, though, we move over to our Reign, and I don't like to say it because the Reign typically tend to be the higher achieving club of the 2 sides. This was a tough one. The Reign split points in Houston, a 0-0 draw. Our player of the match, I'd go with Alana Cook here, a 7.7 match rating, but you could arguably go with the entire defensive roster, the back line there, and goalkeeper Fallon Tullis-Joyce. This game is frustrating mainly because late into the first half, Houston had a player go off with a red card. It was a tough, hot game in Houston, humid. I mean, it comes with Houston if you know what Houston's like at all. But, again, so you have essentially the halftime break to scheme out how you want to attack a 10-player dash. And then the entire second half, you're unable to capitalize. That's where the frustration is with this one. You're coming off of it's just frustrating, especially with the attack. It is tough to still be without Jess Fishlock. You didn't have Megan Rapinoe for this match. Excuse me. Despite returning from the season-ending injury list, Angelina was not available for this match. So you don't have that attacking midfielder, just Fishlock. You don't have her. Rose Lavelle continues to be out. So, yes, there are some notable injuries. I will say that. But there was more than enough offensive talent for the Reign to have found a goal, to have found points, especially with how hotly contested the top 5 spots in the NWSL are. Washington, funny enough, sits atop the league with 23 points, Portland 22, and then you've got 3 teams, including the Reign, North Carolina, and San Diego, who are sitting at 20. And you really just have to be able, you can't miss out on opportunities like this. That, again, where the frustration lies. You come off that win against Sporting Kansas City. Nope, not Sporting Kansas City. The Kansas City Current. I apologize. That one's on me. Where you're able to get 2 goals. You let up a late one. Frustrating, sure, but you arguably should have won that one. I mean, if we look at the statistics here, ball possession is equal. Wow, you actually got outchanced with 2, which is frustrating. Wow, yeah. So that's why, again, I would go with defensive backline for player of the week, player of the game for the Reign. Houston had 18 shots, 3 big chances, and miss all of those big chances. The Reign had 8 shots and only had 1 big chance. That is just frustrating. The Reign committed 4 more fouls as well. That's it's just frustrating up and down the board to sort of have that thing. That red card coming in the 45th plus 1 minute. So, yes, you had all of halftime to scheme in there, unable to do so. You bring on Nikki Stanton in the 46th minute, which is arguably a defensive move. As Stanton's more of a defensive midfielder. You bring on Elise Bennett in the 54th minute for Z. Sure, nice physical forward up front. You bring on Olivia Athens for Bethany Balser in the 55th minute, which is also interesting. Ryan Brown in the 77th minute for Lou Barnes, which is, you get Brown in there, more of a attacking, a faster outside back, and those no shade on Lou at all, but just frustrating in the fact that you had an opportunity there, a pretty good one. Again, mentioning the importance of the points atop the table here, the opportunity you had with the player down, you're not able to score at all, and you get outchanced, which is even more frustrating. So tough, different circumstances, whether it be the injuries, whether it be the heat. Yes, tough. And at the end of the day, the Houston squad is not a bad Houston squad. Former Oil Reign assistant coach Sam Lady is over there with Houston. He's done a good job with Houston this year. So it's not like they were playing nobodies, right? It was a good team, but still an opportunity for you to handle your own destiny there for when playoff time and seeding comes around. So nothing really to report on here. Well, no, I'll go with what we got on Monday with injury-related news. Megan Rapinoe is dealing with a calf injury. I'll get more specificities out here for you. I don't want to just give you the random stuff and not give you exact detail here. And it's tough because I say exact detail, but what we got isn't necessarily entirely specific by Laura Harvey. Laura Harvey says that Megan Rapinoe's injury is calf related and she'll be out a couple weeks, but wouldn't further on any details on if that would be before the World Cup or anything like that. Jess Fishlock doesn't have a clear timeline. Her return date per Harvey is around when the players are leaving for the World Cup or are just about to. For that reason, Fishlock, they're being cautious with Fishlock, and there were no sort of details on what kind of injury it is. It was listed as a leg injury, but there were no further details outside of that, which, again, I get it. You're a coach. You usually don't want to go that specifically into it, but frustrating. So the Reigns sit at a 6-win, 4-loss, 2-draw record. Now it's their second draw of the season, regular season, that is. Excuse me. Looking ahead, as I mentioned, they sit at 4th in the league table at 20 points. Tied. There were 3 teams with 20 points. First in the West in the Challenge Cup division, though, with 7. Looking ahead, I just mentioned one of those 20-point teams. This is going to be a big one. June 24th at San Diego Wave, a 7 o'clock start. This one is on Paramount Plus if you want to watch that. It is not a Challenge Cup game. So regular season standings, this is going to be an important one because you're playing the team that's right below you in terms of points and the standing. So you're going to have to really get back for this one. It'll be interesting to see if we get anybody back from injury, with Jess out likely for this match. I bet she's out for this match. Getting Angelina back as an attacking midfielder would be huge. Megan Rapinoe, I doubt that she's back for this one. Same with, so I think the best case candidate for return from injury in this match would be Angelina, and that would be huge, again, considering the attacking midfield presence that she brings. So all this talk about playoff implications, and we move over here to our Seawolves, who have already locked up the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. And in this last week of the regular season, they were playing the top seed in all of the West in the San Diego Legion. Also, their bitter rivals. This one, a 19-40 loss. A little bit tough here. But I need to give you some context. With both of these teams having their respective playoff seeds figured out, there was really no need for either team to try and win this game. Head coach Alan Clark did kind of put it in a nice way. It's, if you've seen sports, if you've seen a dominant team before in the last few weeks of the regular season, they rest their starters, right? They want their starters ready for the playoffs. That's what these guys did. I know I said it. Head coach Alan Clarkey, basically put a bow on it and made it sound nice. But it's true. He said that basically they're getting they had a second string roster in for the most part. And they're trying to get their younger guys in, continue their development, reward them for battling hard all year long, give them a chance against the top spot in all of MLR, let alone in the Western Conference, which again makes sense. But, they were just resting their starters. There's no point in them trying to beat San Diego in this match. We looked at the player of the game thing, and it was tough. The Seawolves did hang on for most of the first half in this one. They were step for step with the Legion before San Diego got a late try right before halftime to really start pushing the gap there. But Devero Ferris, Devereaux, Ferris, like Ferris wheel, Ferris Bueller. 7 points scored with 1 try. 347 kicking meters on the day. You kind of have to go with. There were some other notable sort of. If we look here at sort of other notable performances, Jeremiah Siu, 6 ball carries, 71 running meters. Yeah. Shane Berry, one of the team's draft picks this year, was able to get in. He had 51 kicking meters in this one and 5 ball carries to go with 38 running meters. So, you see that. We'll go through some of these names because if you're a Seawolves fan, you will probably know these names. But if you've been following along with our Seawolves coverage and just kind of know us, there are names that aren't familiar with it. Jeremiah Siu, Lepeti Ayesea, Shane Berry was a draft pick. Isaiah Latawa, Ronan Foley's been around. Nicholas Watkins, Paige Adam, David Busby, Dewald Donald, James Malcolm. We know James Malcolm. Nakai Penny, we know. So mostly, though, an opportunity for some of the younger players, some of the bench guys, the second string, so to say, to get in and get that experience. Because especially with the Seawolves team, you want to be able to win. And in any sport, you want to be able to win for the future. This is a Seawolves team that will contend this year. But you want to be able to continue to do so. And if not this year, bring a third title back to Starfire in the near future, right? So good to see that. I mean, it was nice, especially to see them really keep up in the first half. Tough to see it kind of fizzle out, but again, that's the best team in the league this year, far and away. And if they handle business in their playoff game at home at Starfire, they'll see them again when all their starters are playing. So Seattle sits at a 12-4 record, 59 standing points on the year, third in all of MLR, second in the Western Conference. Their first round playoff Western Conference Eliminator round 1 game is June 24th versus the Houston SaberCats at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Now, I would highly encourage you to get out to this. I know that, excuse me, later in the day, at a later start time, we talked about it early in the show, at a 7:30 start time, the Sounders are playing, but the Seawolves, this is a playoff game. The Sounders are not playing in a playoff game. This is playoff rugby. This team has been good all season long. We will be there, so I highly encourage you to go out there if you have the opportunity, if you have the time. It is in Tukwila if you don't know where Starfire is. If that's a trek for you, understandable, but you can always cheer the Seawolves on by supporting, the team itself in different ways, supporting our coverage of the team. It's just big. The Seawolves have a very strong community already, but we're trying to grow that game of rugby here in the U.S. So I'm trying to take a look here at the tickets for this game and try to give you an idea of how cheap it is to get in, because it really isn't that expensive. And again, this is a playoff game. So yeah, you can get in first cheap of $35. Wow, the resale is crazy already. But yes, June 24th with a 4 p.m. Pacific time start. So all of that with our show here. We will wrap up with our Seattle Storm having the Seattle Star of the Week. I went with Jewel Lloyd this week. To have the 39-point game is big, obviously. But it was talked about at the beginning of this year that Jewel Lloyd was going to be the leader of this team for obvious reasons, but she's going to do it her way. She's going to do it Jewel's way. Obviously, she had been around Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart to form that big three for Seattle for that nice time, but she was going to lead her way while taking into account how those two were able to lead as well. So, just to see that and to see Jewel be the leader of this team and to be patient with this team, because I know, she obviously has seen Stewie go to New York and form a super team and see all these other superstars. And it's not really the Storm that Jewel has been a part of, right? But to see her accept this role and really continue to be herself in this role is big, and it's going to be big for all of these players, whether it's Horston, Magbagor, the younger guards, just this team as a whole, to have this sort of leadership from Lloyd to take into the rest of their careers, whether that's with the Storm or somewhere else. Obviously, I'd like to see Jewel back next year and to see Jewel be a Storm player for life, but if not, to see her again have this sort of year where she's passing along this leadership and mentoring these players is big. It's big not only for this year and the growth of these players, but for the culture around this organization and these players that will hopefully be carried for years throughout the course of, this franchise's existence. So to wrap up, June 19th, 2023, we continue throughout June gloom. I know a bunch of people are already complaining about the weather. I get it. It was pouring rain yesterday. I got soaked as I was trying to get home from the Mariners game. That was fine. Got the new, we'll move it down here just so we can show it, the new City Connect going on here. So that got soaked, but thank God for cleaning clothes. Regardless, we are in June. Summer officially starts in 2 days, so we'll be getting to that. The Mariners will be continuing their season. The Storm, the Sounders, the Rain, all continuing their regular season. The cricket team, the Seattle Orcas, has more announcements, so we'll get into that next week. But the Seawolves, in probably the most important stage of their season right now, are in the playoffs. So Seawolves coverage, we will see you on the 24th at 4 o'clock at Starfire. So until we see you next week, take care of yourselves, be well, do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Seawolves.